When you're looking for a new home or investment property, why not seek an almost 30-year experienced businessman and real estate professional who loves the cultures of Chicago and understands the Chicagoland housing market? When you choose Ford Desired Real Estate LLC, Shawn K. Ford will answer all your questions about securing a mortgage and providing valuable information for your purchase. LaShawn's house hunting kit includes a detailed summary of area schools, nearby amenities, and testimonials from homeowners who live in your neighborhood of choice. LaShawn knows this city better than anyone and can expertly consult you on property values. He'll take the pulse of your prospective community by highlighting neighborhood activities and notable facts. To list your property or to start looking for your next investment property, call LaShawn at 773-379-4663. That's Ford Desired Real Estate LLC at 773-379-4663.
Well, Meleika, how are you doing today?
I am fantastic, amazing. How are you?
Good. So this is going to be a special episode of Chicago Hill. I'm doing just fine today. And of course, this episode is about women's right to make decisions about their own life, their own bodies.
Yes. Are we going back in time? Like, are they taking us back to, what are they doing to us? I don't understand what's happening.
Well, I would tell you one thing that when we talk about Roe versus Wade, that's a decision that was actually decided almost 50 years ago, where it determined that a woman has a right to choose what she want to do with her body, right? And fast forward 50 years later, the Supreme Court that was influenced by the election of Donald Trump has overturned that ruling. And when I talked to my mother, who's 83 years old, and, she remembers how things were before Roe versus Wade was decided in the courts. And she, of course, talks about how there were many, many alley performed abortions in the United States of America, basement abortions. And after the ruling of Roe versus Wade, we began to see those type of life-threatening abortions take place in this country, which gave women what you call proper access to health care in this country. And so my mother fears that this rollback of law could take us back to those days in this country where it was pretty dark for women.
Well, it definitely appears as if we are going backwards. We're in a time period of, we're in this futuristic age right now. We have internet that can get us information within seconds. We got electric cars. We have so much going on that's advancing us, but yet we have those in the Supreme Court who just want to impose, this is my view, want to impose their religion and their views upon women, our bodies. And God only knows what else that they're about to decide that controls people's choices. You can't control what a woman does with her body. You have no idea what her circumstances are. It's wrong in so many ways. There's no words for it other than just, and I always use the word evil. It's evil. You're imposing what your beliefs on women and you don't know what their circumstance is. And so it's going to put is going to put some people in danger. They're going to endanger their health because you've imposed your views, your belief system on what they can do and what they can't do with their bodies.
You know, and my mother said, she would tell me, she said, women are going to have an abortion if that's what they want. And she fears that in those states where abortion is going to be outlawed, that there are doctors that are prepared to do illegal abortions for women that want to come in and have those illegal abortions. And there will be no regulations, and women will be on their own as relates to those procedures, no protections under the law.
Mm-mm. You know, and you can be one who doesn't agree with abortion. You know, that's not a choice for you. But you can't make that choice for other people.
Mm-hmm.
I am not a supporter of abortion, but I know that there are situations where, you know, if I was in that situation, I would definitely consider an abortion. And so you just can't impose these types of laws on people concerning their body, especially a woman's reproductive system. That is private between her and her doctor. That should not be something that some man on the Supreme Court or woman with these religious beliefs should interfere with.
Well, one of the benefits and I would say great value our country has is that we have laws that we put on the books to improve so that we could be more perfect. But all while we have the ability to improve to be more perfect, it allows for us to change the laws in ways that we may agree or disagree with. And for many, they say 70% of people in this country agrees that Roe versus Wade should stand. 70%. That's a super majority almost of people that believe in Roe versus Wade, meaning that a woman has a right to choose what she should do and can do with her own body. That's big. That's a big number.
So laws are made to improve the world. So how do they think in their mind that this will improve the country? This will improve mankind? Like, how do they think this will improve anything?
How does this bring us to a more perfect union?
Yeah, a more perfect reality. How in their mind, help me to understand how they see this.
Well, this is why there's a few things we got to look at here as a nation. That the right to vote, the right to be free in this country, all of that, and let me make sure it's clear what I'm saying. The right for Black people to be free in this country could be at risk when we see things like the Supreme Court, a conservative court, overturning a ruling for women's rights. You know, that means that our system allows for us to turn back the hands of time, possibly to reinstitute things that harmed us as a society. And that's things like slavery, the right to vote, you know, a woman's right to vote.
How do we expand the Supreme Court? Like, is Joe Biden, is he going to expand the Supreme Court so that we can stop the madness?
Well, that's something that Joe Biden has talked about. The Republicans would call it packing the courts. And you said it as expanding. I mean, the Supreme Court has been at that number, you know, and I think that it's time to look at whether or not we should expand the number of people to that body. So when we think about this America that we live in, we have to be very, very careful who we vote for.
Mm-hmm.
Because the person that we vote for impacts generations to come. And so, if 70% of Americans think that Roe versus Wade should stand, you got to think that many of those people that were polled voted for Donald Trump. Many of those people that were polled voted for Donald Trump, and he didn't share their values. And yet they still voted for him. How do you vote for someone that don't protect your interests? So we look at the fact that we have 70% of the people in America believe that Roe versus Wade should stand. Yet Donald Trump was able to win and appoint a conservative bench. He had 3 appointments, which flipped the bench to conservative to allow for Roe versus Wade to overturn. Now, how did all those people, whether you're a woman or a man, vote for Donald Trump when he said during the campaign that he was going to have a conservative bench? And the people wanted exactly what they got today. They wanted the conservative bench, but did they want the overturn of Roe versus Wade?
So do you think all those Trump supporters, women, what do you think they're thinking right now or feeling right now? This morning.
You have to keep in mind, you can't be you could do whatever you want. A person could do whatever they want, but you can't be you can't vote on a single issue. You got to look big and think big. So, I believe that many people that voted for Donald Trump also believe that healthcare is a right, not a privilege. So there's a lot that could come out of this ruling. And what I hope it does is it brings the majority together. The majority together, meaning the people that struggle in this country that's not a part of the top 1%. Mm-hmm. But the Black people, the white people, the brown people, the working class need to realize that when we give power to people like Donald Trump and his friends, this is what we get. We start rolling back all the good that this country has fought for. And so, this has to be a wake-up call for us.
Yes. I'm glad you keep saying Trump appointed a few of these judges, because as he's gearing up to do his thing again, I think women who supported him in the past before, I think they'll think twice. I'm hoping.
It's not, and I'm glad you even went back to that, Meleika, because it's not just about Donald Trump. It's about people voting for the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. When Maya Angelou said, when they tell you who they are, believe them.
Yes, indeed.
Well, there's no secret. The Republican Party wants a conservative bench. And the conservative bench don't believe in change. They don't believe in a progressive agenda. A progressive agenda doesn't have to mean radical. A progressive agenda simply means that we need to be a more perfect union, and we need to be progressive about getting there, making sure that we don't leave any man, woman, or gender preference behind. That's what it means. That's progressive because we are better as a society today because we know more and we are more respectful of our brothers and sisters for who they are because we know more as a society.
I agree with you 100%.
Well, Meleika, I think your perspective as a woman is valuable in this discussion. And what's the message from you? Because I know we're going to go to some clips. We have Kim Foxx, the state's attorney here in Cook County. We're going to hear from Joe Biden before he was the president, but he was the U.S. Senator. And then we're going to hear how abortions impact Blacks in this country, and also hear a testimony from a conservative state of a woman giving testimony, a Black woman giving testimony in a Tennessee, I believe, state house, I believe. So we're going to hear that. And we're going to wrap up the show and allow people to think about it and
process
it, and think about how voting matters. Think about how we have to elect people that share our values. Meleika, what's your take as a woman on this issue? You said it, but
it scares me. It really does scare me. I'll tell you when, and not to just keep focusing on Trump, but when Trump was elected and he gave that first meeting about healthcare when he thought he had figured it out, and he had all those members who he claimed helped to make healthcare affordable for everyone. It was all white men standing behind him. It must have been like 50 of them standing behind him. I knew then, I was like, okay, we are in for some hell, because there was not one woman, there was not one person of color that stood behind him. And he was like in heaven. He was like, we did it. We did this. They didn't do anything. They didn't make healthcare more affordable. He was pretty much just going to duplicate Obamacare, but put his name on it. It was pretty much what was happening. And I got scared then. And I am really concerned now because I'm a woman. Of course, I don't plan to have children anytime soon. I think that's a wrap for me at this point. But, I have nieces. I'm thinking about younger women out there. You never know what the circumstance is. And I've had friends who've had abortions when I was a younger woman. And you just don't know what the circumstance is. They're making an assumption that is just promiscuous women out here just being careless. And, you just don't know what the situation is, whether it's rape, whether it's incest, whether it's just an abusive relationship, health concerns. There's so many underlying issues. And these people that are on Supreme Court should not come between a woman and her doctor and what's going on in her reality in terms of her terminating a pregnancy. And again, I'll say I'm not one who agrees with abortion, but for certain circumstances, I can understand. I can understand that. Abortion should not be used as a form of birth control. That I agree with. You do have women out there who do use it as a form of birth control, but there are a lot of instances where it has nothing to do with that. And no one should come in between a woman and her doctor and dealing with that situation. And that's where I am with it as a woman. And I am very concerned because if they're doing this, God only knows what else they have planned. And we hope that there's another leak because we did get a leak about this. We hope that there is another leak. Someone will leak out what's to come, what's next. And I hope that the Biden administration, I hope that they do expand the Supreme Court, because it's a little scary. Not a little, it's concerning. Disturbing.
Well, it's disturbing. Let me just say, before we start going to the clips, as a state representative, I've worked hard to work with the legislature in Illinois to preserve the woman's right in Illinois. And Illinois is one of the states that it's been projected that with all of the border states around Illinois banning abortions as a matter of this new trigger from the Roe versus Wade strike down, places like Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, Wisconsin, Iowa, these states, it's believed that they're going to be traveling to Illinois to have abortions because they will not be able to have them in their own states. And so the governor of Illinois has called for a special session of the General Assembly to work with Planned Parenthood to make sure that Illinois is ready to receive women that would like to come into the state for abortions. So we're going to have a special session in Illinois for this purpose. It was believed that about 10,000 women came to Illinois annually for an abortion. And it's projected that now that number could triple with the fact that all the border states have been impacted by this new ruling of the Supreme Court. States like Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Florida, Arizona, Montana. These are states that are immediately impacted by the overturn of Roe versus Wade. But we got to look at those states and ask ourselves, how did they vote? Did they vote for a Republican? Did they vote for Donald Trump to overturn the Roe versus Wade? Now, of course, Donald Trump didn't do it himself, but he did appoint a conservative bench. So Illinois has stated that we're ready to receive women to come into the state for this procedure. And here's one that I would also say that's amazing. Dick's Sporting Goods made an announcement and said that they will be providing their employees up to $4,000 in travel expense reimbursements to travel to the nearest location where their care for their women's health is available. So Dick's Sporting Goods, they're supporting women and their right to choose. You know, Meleika, I want to go back to one thing that you said. You said you, as a woman, you don't see abortion and it should not be used as birth control. Well, I mean, a woman could do what she wants. So when you say that it shouldn't be used as birth control, you don't support that. That's kind of up in the air where you have having it both ways, because there are a lot of people that feel that way. Either you believe that a woman should be able to choose what she's going to do with her body when she wants to do what she wants to do with her body, or you don't. And that's rhetorical, because that's the argument, because I've heard that argument. And so I don't know.
Yeah, I have my beliefs, but I don't think there should be a law telling a woman that she can't use it as birth control. But I personally
See,
don't
see
agree.
now that's very good. And I'm very happy that we came back to it, because a person's belief and what the law should say are two different things. And that's what we're going to hear when we listen to Joe Biden and Donald Trump. But what's most important in all of this is that voting matters. And we have to elect people that share our values, that have the ability and the mindset to listen to the voters and do everything that they can to be a real listener to make America and our states and cities the most inclusive and the most fair place to live. So, Meleika, we're gonna
Well, hey, since they're doing this, since they passed this, then is there going to be something for vasectomies for men?
absolutely, we should look at that. And I believe in the power of mobilizing, advocating, and using democracy as a verb and not just a thing that we look at thinking that it's just going to work out just because. And so there we have it. This is going to be a special episode for women and for our country. And we hope you will reflect on the show. And my email as a state representative, I never really talk about this, but I really want to hear from you, whether you're for or against a woman's right to choose. I'd love to hear from you. Repford at LaShawnFord.com. That's REPFORD at LASHAWNFORD.com. Please email me. I'd love to hear from you, hear your opinions, let your voices be heard.
I'm Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx. As a 22-year-old college senior, 1 month shy of graduation, I made the difficult and personal decision to have an abortion for an unplanned and unwanted pregnancy. A decision that I was able to make because the law of the land, Roe versus Wade, guaranteed me that right. My mother didn't have that right when she drank turpentine to terminate a pregnancy before Roe was on the books. And today, as a mother of 4 young women, and seeing the court overturn Roe, I am heartbroken and devastated that my daughters do not have that guaranteed right. As a prosecutor, whose job it is to ensure public safety, I can tell you that today's decision overturning Roe is not in the interest of public safety. In fact, it's antithetical to that. It's in fact dangerous. What we know is that women will continue to need abortion access and care. And with the denial of quality, safe mechanisms to do so, lives will be at risk. We also know that the criminalization of abortion will disproportionately impact Black and Brown communities and low-income communities and not keep any of us safe. So I'm telling you, as Cook County State's Attorney, I will never use the power as a prosecutor to prosecute those seeking or providing abortions. And that as an advocate, today's ruling has only inspired me to work harder to ensure that we have safe and quality reproductive health care for all, including abortion. The fight has just begun.
I am here to testify on behalf of all of them, the thousands of vulnerable people in Tennessee who would be hurt by Senate Bill 1236, as it for many is the final straw in a political pattern of vile, racist, un-American, and un-Christian legislation that has come from the majority of this body's leadership. The state of Tennessee's reproductive health disparities lay at your feet, not those of us who support women's sacred self-determination. Your consistent and intentional objection of withholding life-saving, sexual behavior changing, comprehensive reproductive and sexual health education from youth and college students by mandating abstinence-based education, your intentional and uncompromising objection to expanding Medicaid in a state where more than half of its people have dire health disparities is irresponsible. You still have not put forth a plan of action to ensure health care that would save our lives and help us make more comprehensive decisions about our pregnancies. You've denied us the opportunity for every member of our families to live and then claim to be pro-life. You have cherry-picked the parts of this state that would expand its behavioral and mental health services and then race to put sick people who struggle with substance use disorder in prison and take away their children while claiming to care about babies and families. You've stood in your righteous indignation and watched undocumented families be destroyed by ICE in this state. You've dismantled their families in the name of democracy. You've denied hardworking families the opportunity at a living wage, yet hold them responsible through legislation that punitively disciplines them for their rage or their inability to be present to raise their children. No one can raise children properly when they have to work 3 jobs to provide a 40-hour work week of pay. You have targeted people because of their sexual orientation with vitriol and hate. Your political track record shows no mercy or compassion for them or their lives, and judgment is not yours to hold over their souls. Have stepped out of your mortal positions and have wedged your fear, hatred, and misinterpretation of biblical texts over their lives and families as if you are God and as if you have a heaven or hell to place them in. You have denied us comprehensive education reform, oversaturated our boards of education with mandates for better testing scores, disempowered and underpaid our teachers, supported the privatization of our schools with no check and balance to ensure quality education, then are angered when you see 20-year-olds on the welfare system. Meanwhile, the only environment you've created among these instances is one that leads Tennesseans to need more abortions, undercare, or neglect their children, regardless of whether or not they want to or are able to parent. Which brings us to why we're here today, in a state full of people who, without God's help and mercy, have nothing to look forward to but being a permanent underclass. Yet somehow you expect them to be assets to our society and not liabilities, and shame them when they cannot achieve the unachievable bar you have set with your harmful policy making. And if all of this was not heartbreaking enough, you wield your political power in Jesus' name. Many of you who claim to be the conservative and Christian have weaponized the word of God to forward your political agendas and maintain power and control over the most vulnerable Tennesseans. You've manipulated biblical scripture to align with your colonialist, supremacist ideologies instead of showing mercy and using the power of your political party to liberate each of us, which was the actual ministry of Christ. I have sat here and I have watched you all allow people to talk and talk. But you won't allow me to talk as a Christian because I disagree with the way that you believe? The only reason I am here, sir, is because somebody taught me about my body. They taught me about, I've not gone over my time. I've not gone off my subject at all. These are intersections that inform abortion. These are intersections that inform why people have abortions. Cut her mic off, please, Sergeant Arms. Thank you. I no longer need an abortion because I know about my body. Stop being an imposter of God's word and do your job. It is unfair to stop me when you have allowed everybody else to talk and you have allowed them to talk about my Savior. I am here to tell you what thus saith the Lord, and you refuse to hear me. I am here because I am a living witness of what it looks like when you empower a woman with education so that she can make the best decision for herself and her family. I've had to sit as a Christian and listen to people who say that they are Christian, demonize and weaponize God's word. Why would it be so important to you to continue something like this when we told you that it would harm families? This is irresponsible of you. It is your responsibility to make sure that every Tennessean has access to comprehensive information so that they can make the best decisions for themselves and their families. I want to reduce abortions like everybody else, but you have backed us up against a wall. If you care about our families, why would you even allow college students who are already adults to learn about their bodies? That came down under Governor Haslam's administration. This is what you have done. Where have you been? You've been nowhere but sitting in your churches, in your brick and mortar, not doing ministry in these streets. God is not pleased, and you need to repent. Where have you been? You have abandoned us. Expand Medicaid. You're not God. How dare you stop me from telling my truth and the truth of other Tennesseans?
Yesterday, many people went off topic and went way over time, and Chairman Bell didn't stop any of them.
I do not view abortion as a choice and a right. I think it's always a tragedy. And I think that it should be rare and safe. And I think we should be focusing on how to limit the number of abortions. And they ought to be able to have a common ground and consensus as to do that.
Would President Trump ban partial birth abortion?
Well, look, I'm very pro-choice. I hate the concept of abortion. I hate it. I hate everything it stands for. I cringe when I listen to people debating the subject. But I just believe in choice. And again, it may be a little bit of a New York background because there is some different attitude in different parts of the country. And, I was raised in New York and grew up and work and everything else in New York City. But I am strongly for choice, and yet I hate the concept of abortion.
But you would not ban it?
No.
Or ban partial birth abortion?
No, I am pro-choice in every respect and as far as it goes, but I just hate it.
Let me turn to abortion. The ban on partial birth abortions or late-term abortions, you supported that ban.
I did, and I do.
You believe that Roe v. Wade was not correctly decided, and that you also believe that a right of abortion was not secured by the Constitution. Why did you change your mind?
Roe v. Wade is as close to we're going to be able to get as a society that incorporates the general lines of debate within Christendom, Judaism, and other faiths, where it basically says there is a sliding scale relating to viability of a fetus. We can argue about whether or not it's precisely set, whether it's right or wrong in terms of its 3 months as opposed to 2 months, but it does encompass, I've come to conclude, the only means by which, in this heterogeneous society of ours, we can reach some general accommodation on what is a religiously charged and a publicly charged debate.
Do you believe that life begins at conception?
I am prepared to accept my church's view. I think it's a tough one. I have to accept that on faith. That is a tough decision for me. But there is a point relatively soon where viability, it's clear to me when there's viability, meaning the ability to survive outside the womb, that I don't have any doubt.
Many fear this would disproportionately impact minority communities. Farai Chideya is an award-winning journalist, and she's host of the podcast Our Body Politic, which focuses on how women of color experience and shape major political events. And here she is speaking to Michelle Martin about it.
Thanks, Christiane. Farai Chideya, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Michelle. Really grateful to be here.
So you've had a long career as a journalist, and in your latest work, you've been digging in particularly on the issue of Black women in our public and civic life. One statistic that's always jumped out is the fact that Black women tend to be more likely to get abortions than other demographic groups are in the United States. I mean, in 2019, like 38% of the abortions that were done in America were done on Black women, who are only 13% of the population. 33% were done on white women or were obtained by white women, and 21% by people who identify as Hispanic. Why do you think that is?
It's money, pure and simple, and medical access. There are many people who, when they go in for the occasional reproductive health check, whether it's related to an unwanted pregnancy or just in general, that might be, one of the few times that they see a doctor. The lack of medical access in America is unparalleled in any other developed nation, and it really, fluctuates by income. And so if you are someone, Black Americans have, 1/10 of the wealth of white Americans in the best of times. It's gone up to the racial wealth gap at times is, 13 times less wealth, less likely to have jobs with benefits. You're living in a country where your health benefits are often indexed to your job. And so simply a lot of people don't have primary health care providers. And by the time they realize they're pregnant, they haven't had like a long discussion of like, what birth control are you on? Do you want to have kids? And then there really are, I'm just going to get personal here. I grew up Black and Catholic, and my family has a lot of social conservatism, but I know within my Catholic community, there were many people who were ambivalent about birth control, but then when they had an unwanted pregnancy, they would go have it terminated. And so there's a lot of, I think, internal, in addition to the economic factors, which I think are the number one issues of health access, the health disparities track with economic disparities. But I think there's also sometimes an ambivalence about what does it mean to deal with the fact that you are, of childbearing age and fertile, and you don't really want to deal with it. A lot of people, not just Black people, but a lot of people who have cognitive dissonance end up putting their head in the sand and then having to face tough choices later.
Well, and here's one of the studies from the Guttmacher Institute, which is one of the premier research institutes that studies this issue, that, 49% of abortion patients live below the federal poverty level, and 59% of abortions are obtained by women who have children. So that kind of tracks with your point. The other data that stands out here is that some of the states with the greatest percentage of African-American women obtaining abortions are also the states with the most restrictive abortion policies. And those are also the states that are the most reluctant to extend health benefits through programs like Medicaid, Medicare to the general population. How does that all fit together?
Yeah, I mean, I would refer to the incredible book Dying of Whiteness, which talks about the ways that expansion of the Affordable Care Act was really restricted by institutional and structural racism, including the idea that, if white Americans are loyal to the cause of American democracy and to how whiteness operates in that, they will themselves be willing to give up health care in order to prevent what one person interviewed in the award-winning book called, the Mexicans and the welfare queens. So people who are lower income whites in some states are literally denying themselves life-saving care out of this misguided notion that you have to play defense against the hordes of brown people. That then trickles down onto Black and brown women who don't have access to primary care providers, don't have a mechanism to guard their reproductive health. And also, I think that one thing that we see is that people who believe that they have things to do in the world in addition to raising children, doesn't have to be opposed to raising children, will really try to guard their ability to go to college, have, time to develop a career. And there's an intergenerational nature to the lack of access to healthcare that really does come out of slavery. There was no such thing as reproductive rights, obviously, during slavery and during the many years that followed of racial terrorism. I met people whose, relatives died in the mid 1900s from abortions on Black farms, people trying to self-abort. People had no access to abortion rights. And when people's bodies were used in chattel slavery to reproduce more farmhands and more laborers, I think a lot of people just passed down a history of trauma around what it means to care for your body and who owns it. Do you own it? Does some larger superstructure own it? And a lot of Black women are heavily traumatized by their experiences in the medical system. And so then you have a rupture between women who need to be seeking regular care in which they might have more control over reproduction other than abortion. But if it all comes down to the 11th hour and it's a go, no go between being someone who, might add another kid to a family that already can barely afford to survive, women are making tough choices. And I think that within the Black community, there's also an idea of some people feel trapped. It's like there's this idea of voter capture. White evangelicals effectively have been captured by the Republican Party. Black Americans often captured by the Democratic Party, because if you are a Black person who's a social conservative, but who does not want to, erode voting rights, what are your choices? And so a lot of people don't feel like they have a home in the medical care system, and they also feel like they don't have a real home in politics. And all of that cognitive dissonance makes it harder to make choices sometimes.
Except that I take your point about the level of social conservatism among African Americans, which is something that I think kind of the white political analysis framework doesn't necessarily capture. But if you look at some of the Black women in Republican politics today, they are some of the most outspoken opponents of abortion. So how do you understand that phenomenon?
I mean, first of all, there should be room for Black anti-abortion organizers. I mean, that is the promise of America, is that you don't have to be, when we really believe in the promise of America, we should have a wide range of political opinion. But, and it makes perfect sense to me. But what we can't do is use those fierce, passionate advocates for what they believe in, which is ending access to abortion. We can't confuse that with the majority of Black opinion. Black Americans are more likely to support abortion rights than white Americans. I believe it was, a Gallup study that showed that, was 57% of white Americans supported abortion rights, 67% of Black Americans. So it makes perfect sense that there's fierce organizers, and there is a history of, some people call abortion Black genocide, which is really a misnomer. Counterfactual, sort of half factual, but there certainly has been a strain of eugenics in America where Black women were forcibly sterilized. Fannie Lou Hamer, for example, was sterilized against her will. Indigenous women sterilized against their will. So there have been many abuses of, the control of Black women's reproductive systems. But whether you were forcing a Black woman during slavery or after to bear a child against her will, or sterilizing her against her will, it's a question of choice and consent. That is really what we need to get down to. Black women should feel free to advocate against abortion or for abortion rights. So I'm very much in favor of that, but we can't mistake the passion and, the urgency of Black anti-abortion organizations for majority Black opinion. It is not.
Well, one of the things that I think you've pointed out is that the social conservatism of African Americans may extend to their own personal choices, but that does not mean that they wish to impose their personal, moral choices on moral and religious choices on other people through law. And that is a kind of a sort of a nuanced position that I think used to be common, right, in voting behavior, but seems to have shifted quite substantially among white conservatives.
Yeah, I mean, that thanks for bringing that up, because that was a big part of my reporting during the 2016 election. So I did a series called The Voters, where I looked at different demographics of voters through a mix of field reporting and data. And I really understood the potential for candidate Trump to become President Trump while reporting on white evangelicals in South Carolina, because the evangelical community at the beginning of the primary season was very much opposed to Donald Trump. And the family I interviewed basically said that one could not be a good Christian, not just a good voter, but a good Christian, and support a man like Donald Trump. And by the end, they voted for him because it was a tactical vote about changing the playing field of abortion. They were single issues voters. Black conservatives in general are not single issue voters. And when they are, it's not about abortion. It might be about voting rights. You might be, a Black conservative or a Black liberal who's a single issue voter, like who's going to preserve voting rights, because without voting rights, you have no choices politically. You can't decide about abortion. You can't decide about anything. And so I think that when we look at the role of Black Americans in the abortion landscape, Black Americans simply are not the kind of single issue voters who would choose abortion as the litmus test for candidates.
According to the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, Black mothers in the U.S. die at 3 to 4 times the rate of white mothers. They are 243% more likely to die from pregnancy or childbirth-related causes. And one of the other things about this reporting that really emerged in the last couple of years is that wealth is not a protector. Education is not a protector of this. I mean, I think that people may remember Serena Williams nearly died in childbirth because people weren't listening to her when she told them what was going on with her and what she needed. And I just don't, how do you even wrap your head around that? And what does that say?
Yeah, I mean, I would also, the Serena Williams example is really key. And then another one, I would urge people to read Tracy McMillan Cottom's book, Thick, which is a compilation of her essays. And she's a sociologist who lost her daughter late in, very close to what should have been the end of a healthy pregnancy, because she was sent home bleeding. She was literally bleeding in the doctor's office, and they sent her home, and she subsequently lost her child. And she talks about how no amount of credentialing, meaning education, wealth, makes some medical professionals believe Black women. How does this relate back to the question of abortion? Very directly, because if abortion access ends, it is quite likely that the lifetime risk of a Black woman dying from childbirth will rise from 1 in 1,000, which is already, 1 in 1,300, which is already massive, to 1 in 1,000. So more Black women will die if they are asked to carry to term pregnancies that they would choose not to have. And let's also be clear about choose not to have. I tried to adopt 3 times, as you know, we talked about it. The women who were the potential, parents who would put their children up for adoption, it was all economic. 1 was Latina, 2 were Black. They were poor. They really wanted to raise their children, which is why I ended up not being able to adopt those children. So if we could, as a country, pull up on poverty, we would have more women who did not want to get an abortion, and who did not want to put their children up for adoption, but who could make choices about how to bear and raise their own children. It is part of a cycle of economic deprivation that harms both the women who, feel like they have to have an abortion when they would love to have a child, but they don't have, a safety net. They don't have paid leave. They don't have sick leave. When I look at the big picture, women are shamed for being poor and having children. So if you are a lower income woman and you get pregnant, you are either going to be shamed for seeking an abortion or you're going to be shamed for being a mother. That's a terrible thing to do. That's a terrible, terrible thing for a country to do to people.
Why do you think it is, though, that the reality of poor maternal outcomes, the reality of Black women dying at such high rates, is not a bigger part of this conversation about this issue? And the reason I say that is that it finally, in the last election, in the 2020 election, it did become an issue that was discussed on the campaign trail. I mean, a number of candidates, Elizabeth Warren, Kirsten Gillibrand, surfaced this issue in a very, powerful way. And yet somehow it doesn't seem to be part of this current discussion around abortion rights at all.
I do think people are talking about this, but what I'll also say as someone who's, spent years as a field reporter, a lot of times it is viewed as detrimental to keeping white voters to raise the issues facing Black and Latinx or Latino people. It is seen as, toxic to, for example, some people in the Democratic Party really are trying to backpedal on racial justice as a central issue of the Democratic Party because they fear losing white voters. And I don't think that that's completely inaccurate. The Republican Party has managed to find a way to hold their coalition together in ways that the Democratic Party hasn't. And I think that affects the nature of the debate over reproductive justice, over healthcare, et cetera. People are afraid of, in some cases, talking about saving the lives of Black and brown people. I mean, it's horrible to say, but it's viewed as tactically unadvantageous to focus too much on it. And as long as that's the case, you're going to have a real hard time building an active coalition to preserve the lives of Black women who are of childbearing age and who are fertile and who need reproductive care. I also do think very much that, I saw this coming. I saw the end of Roe coming from a long way off, in part because of my reporting during the 2016 cycle and beyond. And I think that many white Americans who want abortion rights for themselves and their daughters did not view it as a possibility that they would be denied abortion rights. They were like, oh yeah, maybe there's those poor people who live in that state where they can't get to whatever. But me in my state, I'm cool. And so now we see things like Governor Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan filing suit to preserve abortion rights if Roe ends.
This has been another episode of Chicago Hill. We're going to kick it to Meleika for the final word.
My heart goes out to all women out there right now who are faced with a dilemma right now. You're pregnant and there's a concern, there's an issue, you're afraid. My heart goes out to you right now. Please be safe. in whatever decision that you make. And we got to vote, as Rep Ford said. You got to get out there and vote.